Hello, Alexander the Lame here. Get it? It's a pun on Alexander the Great, except I'm pretty lame, so I'm so funny, I know. This is my first video essay. But I've been wanting to do this for a while, so yeah, I hope to get better at this. This is gonna be rough. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about segregation of gender. What is segregation? So before we break down the topic of gender/sex segregation, we need to talk about what segregation is. Um, the dictionary definition of segregation is the act of separating people or things from the main group. Um, and segregation is most popularly known between race, and it is still a thing. It's not necessarily as big legally, but societal race segregation is still a thing. Um, Not as extreme, but I want to talk about gender segregation today, or sex segregation. A quote from Gender Studies, the website. The website Gender Studies says, sex segregation refers to the practices of dividing people into distinct categories based on their sex, often resulting in separate roles, responsibilities, and opportunities for men and women. The difference between gender and sex is another thing we need to break down. Um, Gender is a social construct that was made, and it's an identity, where sex is what you're born with. There are two main sexes, male and female, but because of mutations, there are intersex people that exist. When I say gender segregation, I really mean sex segregation, but most people don't understand what that means. Sex segregation is more so separating males and females based on their parts. Gender separation is also a thing. Segregation is also a thing and is important, but the sex segregation is the biggest since even though we're still humans, we have different parts. Why do we segregate to begin with? Segregation happens when there's something different and we don't understand. In this world, and America specifically, it is a male dominated world. And that means a lot of times women will be segregated, just like how, especially in America, when the colored people showed up, they were the less dominant group, which led to segregation happening. There's a difference between legal segregation and societal segregation. As I mentioned before, it was a law that black people followed the certain rules and weren't allowed in certain spots, and it was separated. Where nowadays, that segregation still happens, but it's more societal and it's not forced upon. The same thing happens with gender in both ways. The government does have laws against gender, which I'll talk about later, but also socially we segregate ourselves, which social segregation isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could be really helpful to find people that you relate to, that you understand, that understand you, and we use it a lot actually. But it's not like we're segregating as in no, you're not, like we're not ostracizing you for not being a part of it. A big part of these are like GSAs, any club that talks about or that honors your ethnicity, history, race, etc., your culture. You're not allowed to join because you're not part of that, but it is also a safe place for people who are a part of that, which gives them different opportunities so they feel seen because of the world we live in. Is it sad that we have to live in a world where we need to segregate to feel safe? Yes. And that is exactly where my argument for gender segregation and sex segregation comes from. A big argument when it comes to sex segregation is bathrooms. We have always had separate bathrooms, male and female. There's the family bathroom, sure, and nowadays there's some gender neutral bathrooms, which are very nice. But overall, bathrooms are separated male and female for safety. But why is that? Why are they safety? Why should I feel unsafe around a man? Or why should a man feel unsafe around a woman? That doesn't make sense, does it? Another thing is schools. a lot of states and still the majority of schools are still girl boy schools. There's no mixing of girls and boys. Why is that allowed? We weren't allowed to, or we aren't allowed to separate black people and white people anymore. Interesting. But it's historical, so it makes sense to separate girls and boys. Well, so was separating black and white. Why is it any different now? Yes, I understand there's a completely different level to it, but gender is still an issue that gets overlooked in the society because it is not as extreme as race. But as well as race, you can't control your gender or your sex that you're born with. Another thing is pay and jobs. Um, a lot of times, society will have woman-based jobs or male-based jobs. When you think of nurses, it's a woman job. No males do that. That's a lie. My uncle's a nurse. Okay. Or hardworking and lumber workers and truck drivers. So those are all men. Or big smart jobs. Those are male jobs. Why is that? Why do we say that? Why is it majority of that gender? Why are we discouraged to do something based on our gender? There is also an actual thing where it is harder to get hired as a biological woman, as you have to fight harder to get the jobs you want. Or if you're a man trying to get a more feminine job, you're frowned upon. Or you're gonna scare the women that work there. Why is that? Sports is another big issue. Why are sports separated by gender? Why is that such a big argument? Yes, biologically males tend to have a bigger build, tend to have more muscle, but there's some extremely scrawny males and some extremely tough women. Just because there's more doesn't mean these other people don't exist. My personal experience. Why am I allowed to talk about this topic? Well, I'm a queer teenager who doesn't conform with gender. I don't really find a point to it, which is why I'm arguing this topic to begin with. I don't find a reason to separate gender or sex. The reason we have all these trans people and non binary people realizing things about them is because of how segregated we are. It wouldn't matter. It would not matter. When I was a third grader, I remember my friend telling me about the TLC show I Am Jazz. And I was like, oh, what is that? And she was like, oh, she's trans. I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And my friend was like, well, she's a girl brain born in a boy's body. And I was so confused. Not because I was transphobic and was like, that's weird, that's gross. No, I was confused because what makes a girl brain different than a boy brain? At my knowledge, now and then, I only knew the difference between the sexes. What makes the different parts that make girls and boys differently? Why was someone having a girl brain and someone having a boy brain? When I was younger, I didn't like sports. I hated sports, and there's so many jock athletic girls in my school, and I'm like, they don't have boy brains, but they're playing sports, and that's considered a boy thing. And nowadays, those girls are some of the most girly people I know, and I don't conform with gender. So interesting to think how it's not an issue until society makes it an issue. I didn't see anything wrong, or I didn't understand how you can have a girl brain and be in a boy body. What makes your brain a girl brain? Especially now that sexuality is becoming more accepted and known that people aren't just straight or maybe gay, it doesn't make sense that depending on what your gender is or what your sex is how you act. Just because a cis girl happens to like women, does that mean she has a boy brain? No. You wouldn't, or just because a trans man likes men, that doesn't mean they're straight. That's not how that works. Because of society, we segregate ourselves, causing confusion and causing people to have to experiment, and also fear. Fear is a big thing. We have a disconnect from the opposite sex. We always have. Society makes girls go hang out and do girl things and be influenced by the woman in their lives, where traditionally men go do manly things and hang out with the men in their lives. I can admit that as a person born female, I have been afraid of men as a whole. These people, these men and boys could do nothing wrong, and I was still afraid of them. I still am sometimes. I have that ignorance where I am afraid of the opposite sex. And so is a lot of people. We are so different and segregated and told we aren't the same because of our parts, not our brains, that we have a fear and disconnect. And I'm not saying every man is like this, but I've noticed a lot of cis males or biological males almost have a power dominance over women. And they believe they can get away with anything because they're not better than women, but they're men. And it's something in our society we have to think about. And it's very unfortunate that people can't be people. Who is involved in this issue? Everyone. Everyone in America, everyone in the whole wide world. I mean, you don't control what you're born with. I mean, that's already contributing to the issue. You don't control how you're taught. You're not controlled how you are influenced. Even though everyone is a part of this, not everyone notices it. Or they look at themselves and think selfishly. A lot of people, a big argument is the bathrooms, the restrooms. And a lot of cis people, cisgender, meaning they identify with their biological sex, don't understand that the world does not revolve around them. I've heard so many cis people argue about having trans people in the bathrooms, and their argument is, what if it makes us uncomfortable? Or it makes me uncomfortable. How do you think that trans person feels? The bathrooms are a big issue in America. With places like Texas, the law is you have to use the restroom of your biological sex. If you are a trans man who is passing, looks like a man, sounds like a man, sounds like a cis man, looks like a cis man, isn't, but legally they have to use the woman's bathroom. Imagine they walk in looking like a cis man, looking like a man, and they're in the woman's bathroom because they legally have to. The women have an issue with that. There's been countless times where trans people just want to use the bathroom, just want to use the restroom. And you'll have people complain, be like, you're not supposed to be here. Legally, they are. Legally, they are. And so they get kicked out. And if in Texas and other states, they don't all have gender neutral bathrooms. I fortunately live in a place where we have access to gender neutral bathrooms, not just the single stall gender neutral bathrooms, but multiple stall gender neutral bathrooms. People don't understand that trans people specifically aren't being treated with civil rights. They don't have rights. They have the right to go to the bathroom, but in some locations are legally only allowed to use what bathroom through their sexes. Sorry, this is a rough topic. Same for a trans female. Trans girls will have to, in places like Texas, will have to use the male bathroom, and hate criming is a thing for a lot of different groups. But a big target of hate crime are trans people and LGBTQ plus members. Trans males get a lot of hate because of social media and because of a lot of creators giving them a bad rep, which is unfair to them. They deserve so much better. But these poor girls are trying just to go to the bathroom. A lot of times they won't. A lot of times they'll hold their pee or they won't go to the bathroom because they don't feel safe. We are allowed to use the restroom. Why are these trans people not? Because they might get hate crimed. They might be told to get out. Why are these people allowed to get hate crimed and live in this fear? But cis people aren't. Cis people will say, I don't feel safe if there's a trans person. You probably don't even know they're trans. Most cis people using the bathroom have probably gone to the bathroom with a trans person where it's legal and notice them. They're just trying to go pee. And a big argument is, oh, and a big argument against trans women goes back to the male stereotype of being mean and scary. Why is that? Because we segregate and we make it different. We make the fact that we have different parts known and we make it an issue. It doesn't need to be an issue. Biological males don't need to be scary. Yes, they are. There are some scary people that are males. But there's also scary people that are women. It's just gonna happen. And part of this disconnect probably encourages the scary males to act. If we had no, most males' victims are women. Why is that? The disconnect. Since we are seen as different and smaller, but different, since we are segregated because we are different, the males don't understand and think they have control over women. Same goes the opposite way. Why are women so quick to hate on men or say they're the issue? Yes, it's partially true, but what about the poor guy that just wants, I don't know, wants to listen to his favorite song? Or what about the poor guy that just wants friends? Or what about the poor guy that doesn't see anything wrong with anything? I'm very fortunate to have two brothers who are incredibly in tone with their femininity. They're not afraid to be themselves because that's how men are supposed to be. My brothers are some of the nicest people I know because they don't listen to society. Yes, it's a societal issue, but it is also a government issue. Government tends to listen to society, and with laws like the Texas bathroom law, how are you expecting people to be safe? Cis people will say, I won't feel safe if there's a trans person in the bathroom. One trans person? How do you know? Meanwhile, the trans person won't even go to the bathroom because they don't feel safe. And they have reason to not feel safe. Hate crime is real. The cis person saw a news story talking about one man that pretended to be trans to get into the girls' bathroom. A lot of people don't like to listen to this argument and repeat themselves arguing it, but if a man was gonna do something to a girl in the bathroom, he wouldn't take the extra steps to be trans. He would walk in. What's stopping him from walking in? And everyone's like, the solution should be ID. You should see who has what. No, that's invading privacy. So why can't we just let people use the bathroom? Another issue is schools. I have a cousin going into high school this year, and she lives in Missouri. And in Missouri, I learned all the schools are separated by gender. She had choices between schools, but all of them were all girl schools. What does that teach you as a child, as a teenager? Growing up segregated from the opposite sex in school, a place where you're supposed to learn, meet people, use your social skills. If you're only interacting with females, how are you gonna interact with males in the future? That's same with the opposite. If you're only interacting with males who are ignorant to women and don't understand them or know them, why do you think we have crazy people? Or why do you think we feel unsafe? Jobs and pay is another thing. This one's less to do. Jobs and pay, brought it up earlier, and how society throws a fit when a girl is in a man's job and a boy is in a woman's job because the boy is weak and the girl is not supposed to be there. They get all defensive. That's the argument. Why can't the girl be there? But oh, the boy's weak in the girl's job? What does that say about women? Even women and men will say this. They, especially women, because of the seen as lower aspects, will be on that side. They believe that they are lower and lesser because of the segregation. Why is that? It's absolutely insane how this is allowed. Authorities' stance on segregation. Well, these schools, bathrooms, sports, pay, and jobs are all allowed to happen nowadays with the current political climate. It's getting kind of scary for gender expression and gender to begin with. The fact that we make our parts, our sex, a defining part about us as a person and a society does not make sense. It's wrong. And it is segregation. Everyone thinks it's crazy now with the more and more gender neutral bathrooms popping up, or more and more people talking about it. But everyone thought the same thing about unsegregating black and white people. Why is it different now? In like 30 years, even, if we somehow magically stop segregation between genders right now, in 30 years, holy cow, we used to segregate genders? I'm sure that would happen. You hear kids learning about the segregation of black and white people, and they're shocked. Like, what? That's just like my friend down the street. Like, years ago, I wouldn't be able to be friends with him. Like, even though it's not to that point to where we do still interact with each other, we're still allowed to clearly have relationships together, there is still an imbalance and an isolation between the two sexes. Authorities like to play it safe. Authorities will see the issue and play it safe. They won't make a change because the majority, the cis people, are uncomfortable. If this change starts sooner, then they won't be uncomfortable around men as much, or they won't be uncomfortable by the opposite sex as much. They're just confused that people with gender dysphoria, whether it's trans, non-binary, non-conforming, are willing to not align with their sex because it doesn't define them. Just because another interesting aspect is intersex people are real. They're rare, but they're real. A defect in your chromosomes and oh, you're neither male or female. What about them? Where are they going? Why they have to choose? But I thought that's not allowed. And how are you going to make intersex people choose when cis people can't choose just because their chromosomes say they, depending on what mutation, have the same part or have both parts or aspects of one, or they look one way but their parts are different, or whatever. Why, what do they do? You can't argue there's two genders when intersex people exist. You can't argue there's two sexes when intersex people exist. Sex is biological and can't change, but we don't need to segregate it. And gender is a social construct made to go with our sex. If our society didn't segregate sexes, I'm sure trans people wouldn't be an issue. They're not an issue, but people look at them like they are. My solution for this problem is having a third option. I don't think we could completely get rid of gendered spaces, but having a third option would be amazing. As I said before, having communities based on your differences is so important. So I want you to be able to have that choice. But I also want the divide to change. Gender neutral bathrooms would be a good start. There's a lot where I live, there's a lot appearing more, and they're some of the nicest bathrooms I've ever been in. The stalls touch the ground. In America, stalls don't touch the ground, but these ones do. And you're just in and out. You just want to do your business and go. It's not like, oh my gosh, there's a man right next to me, or oh my gosh, there's a woman right next to me. That's not what it is. No one cares. You go in and you go out. But it also takes away some of the fear aspect. If you're a woman and you're doing something a man does, next to that man, it takes away this fear because it humanizes them. I feel that almost the segregation between male and female dehumanizes the opposite sexes. If you're a cis woman, you're almost dehumanized to men because you look weaker, you seem weaker, you're weaker. And as a cis man, women are commonly dehumanized as they're seen as smaller and lesser to a cis man, traditionally. And as a cis female, men are seen as big and scary and have a history of hurting women. If we were able to break this disconnect, it would humanize us to fellow humans. Dehumanizing is a big part of segregation. It was with race. It is same with religion, and even now. It is still with race. Race is still an issue across the world. In wars, they use dehumanizing tactics because of your race or your country or your ethnicity. The disconnect is real. I want you to be aware of that. And if you've never used a gender neutral bathroom and you have the opportunity to, do it. I also believe we should have less segregated schools in certain states. And I know that's a big issue in Europe too. If I have kids and I lived in Missouri, I want my kids to have an option to be both sexes. I think we should encourage having mixed sports teams with girls and boys. And it doesn't matter, it's just there's some really powerful women out there that are just as powerful as men, but biologically they're not. Or there's some men that might need to be with the weak women, which is not true. I also believe that we should normalize not having, I also believe we should normalize jobs and opportunities and doing what you want to do, not what you're told to do. If you want to be a nurse as a man, fine, go do it. If you want to be a construction worker or a big boss as a woman, go do it. Why does it matter? It's creating this disconnect. And yeah, sure, there's a few people that will do it, but then it's one person in a group of many people. Of one person segregated in this group of many people. If you're a woman in construction, you're probably going to be the only woman with the current situation. And that's not going to feel good because of this disconnect from males and females. You're going to feel isolated. Same with maybe a man really wants to do baristaing. And if you're in a coffee shop with majority women workers, you're going to feel isolated. Our disconnect because of genders is a big isolation aspect. And I think if we don't create that between sexes, and I believe if we don't create that for people growing up, don't encourage that toxic masculinity, don't encourage that fear of men, we're on a pathway to be seen as equals. I believe step one, though, is encouraging gender neutral bathroom. It gives everyone an option. You still have your gendered bathroom if you need to feel safe, or if you don't feel safe, or you want that community. It normalizes doing things as humans and not as males or females. Yeah, thank you for listening to my first video essay. It was really rough. I my other videos will definitely be more polished. Um, I kind of was rushed. Hi, Professor. Because this video essay is actually for class. Alexander the Lame, out.